So this decade was when a lot of the soon-to-be greats of the past kind of fully became, the part of the conversation of the greatest directors of all time. I feel like directors like Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, even Quentin Tarantino to a certain extent, kind of came into their own, and finally we acknowledge them as extremely influential figures in the game. And a lot of them just kind of kept going for topics that were bigger than themselves. They went for set designs and stories that felt bigger than what they probably were as human beings. With Wes Anderson, it'll be like movies like The Grand Budapest Hotel, which is bigger than anything he's ever done. And Quentin Tarantino actually tackling the movie industry with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Only one of them decided to finalize his great director portfolio with a personal film. And I feel like that should be commended, especially to the extent that he made this movie. Everything in this film is seen through a very strange lens. In the background, a lot of political stuff is happening, but the main characters kind of just simply struggle through and kind of glide through life. And I feel like that's how childhood is like in general. All the important real world drama is a faint sound in the back, but everything involving your family feels big and almost life dependent. And I feel like the last scene at the beach is where all of those emotions kind of culminate together to become this huge emotional, kind of a bomb of a scene. And considering that this whole film is Alfonso Cuarón trying to like portray and sort of, give tribute to the people of his childhood, that makes sense. And it really kind of goes we need to say a lot about the great filmmaking that's done here. The lighting really sets this sense of intimacy in the film. A lot of the scenes when it comes to the way the rooms are lit up, especially the rooms where the maids are living, it's lit up in a very cozy way that brings you this sense that, yeah, this used to be someone's home. This could be my home, anybody's home. But then there are moments of grandness that sort of come out in a very natural way when it may not even be the situation that's grand, but the way you feel about it is grand. Like the beach scene again, the way the lens flares happen, the way you like explicitly see the sun just shining down on the beach, it makes everything feel much bigger than it is. And he also goes for this sense of surrealness, which you kind of feel about the world when you're a kid. The main one I want to talk about is the one with when the forest fire happens. That's a very Fellini-styled scene to me, because everyone's trying to take out the fire, but then this one guy takes off his little costume and he starts singing, and it's a very magical, almost somber, sober, sort of a meditative moment to just kind of take it all in. And I think that's what Fellini did a lot in his early 60s stuff, maybe even in his late 50s stuff. And I feel like Cuarón is trying to go for exactly that. Maybe he saw 8.5 or Amarcord and thought, yeah, I think that's exactly how I should translate this scene. And a lot of the intimacy and the sense of childhood wonder also should be credited to Yalitza Aparicio's performance, whose amateurish tendencies, because this is like the only film she's been in, her amateurness doesn't come off as being aloof or being a bit loose or, being bad. It comes off as, shy. It comes off as being shy. And it also gives this strange sense of, observantness to the character, which makes you kind of take the ride with her to kind of see everything and take it all in. You realize to her, this family is all that matters. The political stuff in the background does not matter. She's kind of taking the same role as Alfonso Cuarón did when he was making this movie. So it really adds to the character vessel that we can take in. And it helps you absorb every second of this bit of life. We're always, too busy. We're scared to remember as we grow up. Alfonso Cuarón, it doesn't surprise me that it took this much time for him to just go back into his past, not like create these new worlds and these new relationships, but just go back into his own memories, pull something out and create something great with that. And this is exactly what that is. It's just a great piece of life that we forget, but we should remember and be thankful for. Another director who came into his own as a great director in this decade would definitely be Richard Linklater. You know, the hipster kid of the 90s indie brat pack finally became a household name within this decade with multiple critically acclaimed films over here and there throughout the years. So you can't put him off the list of directors who kind of became these auteurs within the last few years. And the main movie that I want to talk about here is a film that was years in the making. So we all know what it is, we all know the title, so let's say it together. 3, 2, 1. Honestly, if the other two films of the trilogy came out this decade, I would probably put all three of them together as one movie and just put it at number one. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and we have to deal with this movie on its own. And even on its own, I gotta say, it's probably my favorite film of the trilogy. Instead of analyzing this movie, quite frankly, and intellectualizing it, I just kind of want to go for a story here. My aunt was visiting us at the time, and I just started playing this movie in the living room without really thinking much about it. I just kind of wanted to see it again. And my aunt's a very sensitive, artistic type. She's a college dropout. She used to be a photography major, but I guess she didn't really get into the whole system of the thing. And she's married with a kid now. She's helping out my mom with being an English teacher. She's very tired. She clearly doesn't want to do it, but she just kind of has to because, that's how you pay the bills. And her marriage is not the best. She's clearly not a satisfied person. So when the argument scene in the film started to happen, she was completely fixated to the screen. She was so into it, and she wasn't saying anything. She was just staring at the screen with this really serious expression on her face. It was like she was thinking about so many other things, just by watching this film. And when the film ended, my aunt just told me that this was one of the most beautiful things that she's ever seen. And my aunt's not a film nerd. She's not a movie buff. She doesn't have that filter to intellectualize movies, which unfortunately a lot of us tend to get when we watch too many films. This film was so good at portraying a marriage that it just went straight to her. She immediately understood it on a gut level. And quite frankly, that's all the proof I need to know that the film is good. I can't relate to anything in this movie, and even I get so emotional and invested in these characters and care about what they do and how they feel. So imagine how my aunt felt. It must have been both torturous to her, but also at the same time it probably confirmed and reaffirmed a lot of things about how she saw her marriage and how she saw people. So yeah, I mean, what more could you say? I can hear millions, thousands and millions of critics and intellectuals analyzing this film from front to back, how this references this and that shot references that, but in the end, all I really need is a person who's living the movie in real life, realizing that this movie's doing a very good job at portraying something that is very real. And I guess that's enough for me too. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the greatest and also the most underappreciated genre in movies is probably animation. This is the one genre where limitations literally don't exist. Everybody talks about movie magic, but I feel like as time goes by, movies are either becoming more artificial or we just want more realism in films. Within animation, I think people realize they can literally do anything. It's the one genre where movie magic is a very real term. It's also a great way to freshly explore very tired topics with different looks and different settings and different, different limitations that you put on yourself. And maybe even make difficult and real life issues approachable to everyone, including children who are much more, appreciative of the genre compared to anybody else. So with all these standards for this genre that I have, I just had to pick this one as probably one of the best films of this genre that I've seen in my whole life. I can talk about a lot of things about this movie. I'd love to talk about every single ideas that went into the designs and the settings of the film. Like that abstract room, like that's one of the best things I've seen in any film. And, I love to talk about how all the voice acting is on point. Amy Poehler, Lewis Black, Mindy Kaling, everybody does a perfect job. But I really want to talk about, the main thing that I want to talk about is what this film is trying to do and what this film is trying to say to anyone, including kids. Obviously the movie is about mental health and plenty of people have talked about this, but it's very interesting how it talks about mental health. It does it in a somewhat blatant way. Like, there's not much to the imagination that this film gives you. Like, it's very blatant about feelings and how people react or, operate within certain situations when it comes to trauma and grief and, obsessing about things in the past. And a lot of it is never done much in animation within the genre. Even in real life, people are very conservative and very nervous about these topics, and I feel like the fact that this movie is doing it not just within this genre but for kids is very impressive, and it's very explicit and detailed to the point where even a child would understand what the film is trying to say. And I think the main message of the movie is one of the most original messages I've seen in any film. A person can easily see this movie and say, oh, okay, this movie is trying to say it's okay to be sad. Like, yeah, that's one way to see it, but that's such an obvious way of reading the movie, and not only that, that's such an unoriginal message. We've seen plenty of children's stuff that says that, oh, it's okay to cry, da-da-da-da. No, that's not what this film is trying to say, at least for me. What this film is trying to say that not only is it okay to be sad, sometimes you need to be sad in order to overcome obsession, grief, and all these very somewhat toxic emotions when it comes to the extreme versions of them. And this is something that anyone barely talks about. Adults can barely comprehend this idea that it's okay, that sometimes you need to be sad to overcome things, that it's essential to be sad. And Pixar, which is obviously an extremely innovative studio who unfortunately is kind of getting stuck in the loop when it comes to the overly sentimental stuff they're making. And they've sort of created this unfortunate trend of just every animated film being 3D. I love the fact that they're still trying something new, trying to do something powerful, trying to do something difficult to comprehend for most people and making it so approachable. And when I saw it, it got to me right away. I understood what the film was trying to say immediately, and I was in tears. I was crying so hard. I was eating every single thing about that movie up. And unless you're like the most cynical person in the world, I can't see how anybody can watch this movie and not appreciate what this film is trying to say. For anyone who's felt even remotely just in a loop, in a rut, in any negative way. It's just very impressive to see a studio that can be complacent trying to still impress and do something new. This might seem a bit out of place, but I kind of want to talk about The Graduate for a second. I have a love-hate relationship with this movie. It just reminds me of myself a bit too much. Like this sense of being lost and being desperate, being obsessive over small things and being obsessive over people, only able to make choices, out of spite and jealousy, and how past choices I make come to bite me in the ass in the end. The film is so realistic to the point where whenever I see Ben in the movie, whenever I see Dustin Hoffman, I'm just like, yeah, that's me, and I hate the fact that that's me. But the film is so well done and interestingly made that I get sucked into it. The fact that I can see myself in this movie is probably the reason why it's great and why it's considered a classic and why it's considered this innovative movie in screenwriting and in filmmaking. And it just hurts more every time I see it. So, here's a new film that does exactly that. I've seen this movie probably around 6 times. Every time I see it, I keep hoping that it would feel a bit more distant, maybe it would feel like it's further away from me, and every time it just feels like it's getting closer and closer and closer, which is very stupid of me to expect that this will feel more distant considering that I'm gonna be turning 22 this year. And this film is about a person in his mid to late 20s. Obviously, I'm gonna get closer to this person in this movie. And I'm at that point in my life where I'm looking up celebrities and entrepreneurs and who are the same age as me and feeling insecure. I look up what certain artists did at 22 and feel insecure at the same time because I'm not doing the same thing or at the same caliber. And I have this desperation to grow up, to mend things, but I don't know how to. And that's exactly what this movie's about. Frances is a character that's just a bit too real. The fact that she does not know what to do and decides to go on these little adventures here and there, not really getting too much out of it, but just to get something new out of anything. It feels too real. I see myself not only in her, but in other people in this movie. There's just one character who the roommate who could have been her boyfriend. He's like, hey, did you have a bad day? Hey, listen to the song. Do you like it? Cool. I'm gonna put it on the playlist that you'll probably never listen to. That's me. That's exactly me. That hurts so much. It seems to get more real with every decade, and obviously the main credits need to go to the 2 figures behind the movie. Noah Baumbach, or whatever. He decided to go with this vintage, sophisticated classic look that's been popularized since Woody Allen's Manhattan, and Greta Gerwig it's gonna take a while for her to top this. This is still the best performance she's ever done. And there's just so much. She brings a great contrast to the sophisticated style because everything looks so sharp and focused, and here's her bumbling around her life, being lost and being very emotional. And that's such a great contrast. It just sucks you in because suddenly your focus is completely centered around her. And I love the fact that she's a dancer. Of course she's a dancer. That's expression in the physical form. It fits Frances so perfectly. It fits the character so perfectly. And the detailed side characters and the small details in her actions. I love the Adam Driver's hipster, slightly douchebag but likable douchebag character. I love the friend-zoned roommate. I love the friend that keeps going in and out of her life because that's how friendship sometimes works. I love those small scenes where she's just running to the ATM, she's coming back and she just slips, but she's like, no, I need to pay for the dinner, and she keeps running. It's great. And small scenes here and there gets so much more real as time goes by for me. The scene where she goes to Paris. That's how traveling is, really. You just go somewhere, you just walk around, that's all it is, and you realize, wow, doing this alone kinda sucks. And every year, every month, quite frankly, this film, small things in this movie become more real every time I see it. And one day, I swear to God, I hope this movie is not relatable anymore, because if it is relatable like 20 years from now, I'm gonna get so depressed. But for now, it's clearly doing a great job at giving me a panic attack about my life. Everything feels so real that it hurts. It probably is a sign of a great film for anybody who's gonna see it in the future, who's around this age or just at that point in their lives where this movie will completely connect. The first time I saw this movie, I knew it was gonna be number one on a list like this. It just made complete sense to me. It seemed to make a lot of things very clear. It helped me through my inability to be natural with people. But it never felt pandering. It seemed to be saying something much bigger than, petty old me. It seemed to say to me that despite my flaws and my traumas and whether or not I'll ever overcome them, life can still be okay. And as you might have expected at this point, considering the things I'm saying right now, how can this movie not be a number one? I feel like anybody who's trying to create anything should watch this movie, because I feel like it'll be inspirational to any of those people, because this film is done with simple drawings and nothing's outlandish. It's an artist trying to say everything with whatever they have around them. It's kind of a result of minimalism adding to the dreamy atmosphere of the whole film. The collages and the field recordings adds to this strange ambience that kind of sucks you into the atmosphere of the movie. And something about the whole thing feels reachable and tangible. And I think that's also emphasized because what the film is trying to say overall is so universal. This sense of being not yourself and constantly going back to your past, grabbing onto them, not knowing what to do, wanting to blame something, but instead you just kind of come back to yourself while you run around trying to find that thing to blame. It feels unadulterated amidst everything films have become as a whole. When it comes to standing out in the movie industry nowadays, you need to be original, you need to have money, it needs to be louder and bigger and experimental and interesting and fusing genres. That's all great. But sometimes, that you get enough of that from the world. The world is loud, it's rude, it's mean, it's on fire. It's just too much sometimes. At least that's how I feel about the world. And sometimes, that's how living is. There's so much input and so many things to think about, so many things to care about, so many people to care about, so many relationships and tasks. And amidst all of that, this movie just kind of reminds me that all you need are the things around you. It's very meditative and healing, and at the end, when the film just kind of decides to kind of show you this ideal state of being, and how even then everything will simply go away, everything will still end, and we'll just be part of this big, gigantic, stupid universe. It's both extremely depressing, but at the same time you're like, well, that means everybody's the same. No matter how much money you have, no matter how famous you are, no matter how talented you are, how smart you are, how beautiful you are, in the end, we're just all in the same position, and the best thing that we can do is just march on and do whatever we can. And that was sort of a huge revelation to me when I saw this film. It just made me feel like I can finally get over certain things. And it also reminded me that I can probably say those things in a great way, because this movie, it's not this extreme masterpiece of technicality. When you see this movie, you're like, I can do those drawings too. And if I really put some time to it, I maybe even with the small amount of talent and skills that I have, I can create something that's bigger than me, that says something bigger than me, that I can also appreciate at the same time as alongside the world. It seems to say so much about my life and everything, and the fact that it's done in these simple drawings, it makes me hopeful, which is not something that I can say for a lot of things. A lot of great movies, even if I appreciate them, it makes me feel small, and this is the one great movie where it's like, I see it and I'm like, okay, got it, now it's my turn. And no movie has done that in my whole life. So here we are. That's the number one, and yeah, I hope anybody who even watches this movie can feel the same way. And I thank you if you've been listening to me. If you've even just listened to this one video and have not listened to any of my other reviews, that's fine. That still means you watched the end of this video. That's incredible. And yeah, I'm not saying that I will never make movie reviews again. I'm just saying this will be the end for the moment. This is my indefinite hiatus, so to speak. So yeah, thank you for listening. See you on whatever else I do on this channel, because believe me, I'll be on this channel all the time still. Alright, I think we're good. Yeah.
Until time loses all meaning, and the moment comes that he knows only the positions of the stars, and sees them whether his eyes are closed or open. Until he forgets his name, and the place where he'd once come from. He lives and he lives, until all of the lights go out.